Hello, wherever and whenever you're watching this, a very warm welcome indeed to this very special conversation here at Christie's in London. My name is Gareth Evans, I'm your host for this conversation. It's a real pleasure, as I said, to welcome you wherever you're watching this across the world, of course, and across time, because you might be watching this in a different time frame, a different time zone. We're thinking about time and place tonight. We're thinking about 21 years ago. We're thinking about the future. We're thinking about the deeper past. We're thinking about lots of things with my two very special guests here to be introduced very shortly. Now, as I said, we're coming from Christie's. Christie's founded in 1766, been doing their thing for 250 plus years now. Many, many firsts, of course, in that great lineup of auctions. And a first here tonight and a first during this week, of course, as we see the online auction of First Open, within which, of course, many artworks by our guests here tonight are featured. Do please take a look online, of course, in the ways that you know how, to find details of that auction, just the beginning of an autumn of works across all media by my very wonderful guests. Now, we're in the heart of St James here. Christie's, of course, in London and across the world. St James, the home of William Burroughs, among many others, both a countercultural and a cultural location. And there were incredible scenes here early this morning when, by complete chance, but very fortuitously, there was a whole office discovered, secure and untouched from the mid-1990s. There was a moment of panic, of course, among the auction team. Had they forgotten to auction a major installation in the recent contemporary art exhibition? No, they hadn't. It was an office in the labyrinthine interior of Christie's that had been completely overlooked for nearly 25 years. But it did yield one incredible piece of technology, which is in front of me now. Of course, this is a fax machine. For younger members of the audience, of course, will have no idea what I'm talking about, but it's a form of communication technology that was actually patented for the first time in 1843. It was actually first functioning as an electronic telegraph in 1865. That's 11 years before the telephone was invented. So we'll be thinking very creatively with the prompt of this wonderful machine and prompted by your own extraordinary questions very shortly in conversation. Now, there are many, many people to thank for this undertaking. Here are Christie's Victoria, James, Indigo, Henry, Daniel, the whole extensive and hugely skilled technical team around and behind me. Of course, Julie and Brian keeping everything going as they always have done. So it's really a collaborative process, a collaborative operation here tonight. And you, of course, friends, fans, fellow travellers, clients are all part of this journey. So I'm really glad that you can be with us. This, as I said, is part of the first open week here at Christie's. Now, you have submitted your questions in advance, and they will be coming to me at regular intervals on the said fax machine. We can only, of course, deal with a handful of them, but many, many thanks indeed for sending them in to us. We will just touch the tip of the iceberg, of course, of these questions, and that is, by definition, an iceberg that is rapidly melting. Now, in no short order, we will be introducing our guests, but just to remind you that by attending this wonderful event, you've agreed not to record the event in any way. You will remain, of course, muted and anonymous, which is arguably a very good thing in the current climate. And we will endeavour, as I said, to get through as many of your questions as possible. So it remains just for me now to welcome our two very, very special guests, Stanley Donwood and Thom Yorke. Welcome.
Hi. Hello.
Welcome to you both. It's great to have you with us. We're thinking around 6 major canvases that are downstairs as I speak, and they are the prompt, if you like, for a series of questions and thoughts about the whole KID A Amnesia problem and project. I say problem because it was a problem really for you at the beginning, Thom, wasn't it? How to make an album like this out of your previous experience. Now, many of our guests online now will have seen the short film that you wonderfully put together for Christie's, talking us through the years before the albums came out. And you were not in a great place, I think it's safe to say, but you found your way back, if you like, both to recording and to art through your collaboration with Stanley. Can you just give us a flavour of that moment, that time, when you were thinking about what you were going to do next and how, more importantly, how to do it?
Yeah, I mean, it was at the end of OK Computer, we finished touring, and I was sort of trapped in a series of sort of, in my own particular labyrinth, and followed by this weird sort of monologue, criticism, everything I did, which became from being sort of propelled into this weird state where people were projecting things onto me in a particular way, which I didn't have the right sort of support mechanism to deal with it, and so I internalized a lot of it, and it sort of kind of shut me down. And so whenever I tried to write something, whenever I sat in front of any instrument, I sort of froze. I had this sort of thing in the way, this little voice going. I mean, I remember sitting endlessly playing the riff for Everything in Its Right Place, like a sort of trying to meditate my way out of it and not being able to, until eventually I'd sort of stopped for a while. We were in Cornwall a lot, and I was walking around absorbing the landscape, being in the sea a lot, and I just started drawing and absorbing the landscape and thinking visually, and only visually, like stopped working on music for a while. Started to think of myself, well, maybe I'm, you know, that's not all I am. Maybe I can just eke out something, another way to be creative, and then for some reason that helped everything. It sort of eased the crisis very, very slowly, but also the landscape element of it became like this new sort of vocabulary where, you know, landscape is so cliched in every way, and I didn't understand. It was just what I had. It was what Dan was coming to see me. We were wandering around. That's what we were doing, Mr. Stanley Donwood. That's what we were doing, and didn't really think anything of it. And then maybe it was when we went to Paris and saw that Hockney exhibition.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of the things that we'd been doing for the highly successful and unexpectedly successful OK Computer were very small. We had a tablet half the size of this fax machine to draw onto, and that was all there was, hand-to-eye coordination, no emotion, and everything was very intellectualized because of that. And so the idea of working on these large canvases was to engage your whole body, physical. All of the kind of memories and traumas held within the tissues of your whole frame, rather than just your brain. So that was, and the idea was, I think, to try to interpret through this sort of more visceral way of making marks.
But it was a way of breaking out of a lock. Yeah, definitely.
And it was operating at scale, of course. You know, we know the size of the canvases. You know, people can see them online. You can come and see them here in person at Christie's. And it was something about that idea of the Hockney landscape scale that allowed you to sort of just break out, as you said, Thom, of the space, but also just, you know, to start bringing in all sorts of other media traces and textures into that process. So how did you set yourself up together to kind of start this creative process? I mean, obviously you'd known each other for 10 or so years by then, but what was the process in the course of this journey?
Well, I think a lot of it was like that, seeing that Hockney show in the Pompidou, because the band were trying to make music. They didn't have a studio yet at that point, so there was a sojourn in Paris and then Copenhagen, and both places we were going to see art, big stuff. And that Hockney show, it was of the Grand Canyon, so it was a kind of massive mosaic of square canvases. Each one was a decent size by itself, but it was almost like a painting. It felt like you were walking into the Grand Canyon. It was amazing.
It was almost like the Hockney thing just turned us on to this idea that we could use landscape as a language in what we were doing. By coincidence, we'd already started, but we were only doing it as a way of breaking free. And then suddenly we were looking at what he was doing, going, "Oh, maybe this is legitimate. Maybe there's something in this," you know.
I mean, the landscape thing's interesting, isn't it? Because, of course, you know, the Hockney Association might be surprising to some of the viewers, but it was a very significant shift from that kind of landscape to the much more alienated and damaged landscapes that we come onto in the process, which we see traces of downstairs, Stanley. Now, I mean, for you, what's it like seeing, you know, this artwork in its own terms today on the wall?
I tell you, so I was just talking about this a minute ago, and it's just really, really weird. It's really strange. Because I haven't really seen them. They've been in a storage unit. They've been in the attic of my studio. They've been in various places. They have had a brief showing for 6 weeks in a museum in the Netherlands, and that was 10 years ago. So I haven't seen them for ages, and I was downstairs here, and we'd been putting the show up last Friday, and then they put the music on, and I hadn't heard KID A and Amnesia. I hadn't heard the music whilst looking at the pictures for 20 years, and it was a very strange feeling, and one that I can't describe, as if the ground is taken away from you underneath, and the ground consists of the sediment of 20 years. It's really weird. I don't know how to describe it.
Well, you've done it very well. I mean, Thom, let's run with that idea of the music and the image coming together. When you got your space in the end, this was a split-level space. The music was downstairs. There was a mezzanine level where Stanley was upstairs, doing what he was doing. Now, you were the conduit between the two levels. So what was the kind of, if it was ever declared, was there a brief, was there a kind of mission statement at the beginning that you gave to Stanley or that you developed together?
Imagine.
Direction of travel, shall we say?
Well, maybe, I don't know. It was in the music,
It was in the music, but then there was also sort of things that spoke to us along the way that we're bouncing off ideas all the time, but it wasn't like we'd always start with an agenda, but we'd always start with an agenda knowing that we would jettison it. That was the way for the way we were recording, the way that we went about trying to get the band to do something different. It was like, well, we start here, this is the kind of, but then where we ended up was somewhere in that letting go of the desire to go anywhere specific and enjoy the chaos and the process and the mistakes along the way became the thing. And that when stuff started to come to fruition, when the first landscape painting started to come together, when the first good sounds started coming out of the studio, you have these pockets, these moments are like, oh, we're on something, and then another few months of like, and then another,
I'd really remember that we'd really started out, we rented a kind of cell in a warehouse. It was very much like a cell, a kind of concrete cell in a warehouse to paint in. And we were starting off trying to paint landscapes, but it just didn't work. The colours wouldn't come, the landscapes wouldn't settle until we kind of hit. It was because of the time. I was deeply upset by the war in what had been Yugoslavia, because for the first time this was the internet giving you information almost as it was happening, and it was it was extremely close to home. And the Berlin Wall had fallen down. This stuff was supposed to be in the past, but it wasn't, and it was all happening in the winter. It was all happening in this snowy, very European, very familiar landscape. But this snowy, beautiful landscape was full of, concentration camps. People rolled up in barbed wire and pulled along by a tank. Stuff like this. It was gruesome. There
was a violence that he would put into what he was painting and then hide again, which was really interesting.
We've got several questions actually about the whitewash material. Which
we should let the facts talk.
No, we'll let the facts talk. I mean, really great to set that up. Thank you both. But Thom, for you, this was a return to art, of course, as you mentioned earlier. And how much were you upstairs? How much were you downstairs? And what was leading it for you at that point? Was there a symbiosis of the two forms?
To be honest, it was just this constant relief that because I have the attention span of an insect, so when I've got no longer anything to contribute, I could just simply walk away and go and do something else, which, if you ask the other guys in the band as well, was also beneficial to them, because I wouldn't be sitting there like all frustrated or whatever because it wasn't going quick enough. So the main benefit for me was I could just walk into a room, bounce off ideas and then walk out, which
But you were making marks on the canvas, right? These works were
and then running away,
and then you were painting over them, right? To a certain
all
degree.
Of them. I left the good ones.
No. There's some great commentary in the film about that. But how did that process of actual making work? What give us a flavour of the a kind of day on the floor of the studio, and what I mean, perhaps in some ways, what was it like? You'd turn up. Would you have started a canvas, Stanley? Would Thom come in and then had something, you'd step back, you'd kind of give each other a crit,
I think that I just remembered that I think the size of the canvases was the size they are is because that's the absolute biggest you could fit diagonally through the door of this mezzanine. So they were big canvases in a small space.
It was like sometimes the best thing about it was to go and sit with the paintings was a way. a way of thinking differently about what was happening with the music. And so the process, I don't think it would be really a process, just more like, I don't know, I felt like that I'd come in and sort of make sort of comments and throw ideas up in the air and stuff, but it wasn't like anything fixed. It was just part of a conversation. And likewise, it then became part of the conversation with what would happen in the studio as well. You know what I mean? But not in a sort of, I've decided that we should do this, because he and I spend a lot of time talking around what interests us, and it gets absorbed into what we're doing at the same sort of time. And you can pretty much document every sort of record that we've done, that the two sort of go together. But it's not like, I think we should put this here and symbolise this, will symbolise this. We just can't.
The work is multi-layered. The music is multi-layered. The artwork is multi-layered. And all of the mistakes are still there. If you had some way of X-raying an audio track to find out all of the things that have gone wrong, they're still there. There's still evidence. There's still traces of that. And it's the same with the artwork. There was layers and layers and layers. And there's paintings that have been almost entirely obscured with whatever is then deposited upon the surface, which is more relevant.
But then also,
the music does.
Then also another point of conversation outside of that was always sketchbooks as well. We'd literally swap sketchbooks, and that was another way of conversing without having to.
And that, I must say, that's why we were so pleased to see the Sanyo SFX33, because we did a lot of communication through fax machines.
I mean, it's a particularly good model, I think, and working very well so far. Of course, we don't want to tempt any negative karma, but we've got all sorts of incredible questions still on these pages. Now, let's just think a little bit more, Thom, about what you said there, because they're not illustrative images, and likewise the lyrics and the music are not telling the story of the paintings. But did they start to how did you think about sequence of the albums? Because that's always a question that people have in the case of these albums. It feels inevitable now, but of course we know it's not, right?
No, it wasn't at all.
Was there a visual sense? Did you kind of think of a journey visually that might have formed that, perhaps?
Okay, interesting. So basically, what we were pathologically in denial me especially, in denial of the concept of any sort of deadline. Which meant we worked for, I don't know how long it was, a year and a half, 2 years, okay.
2 years.
And I would still be coming in, I've learnt my lesson, I don't do this anymore. I would still be coming in with new ideas all the time and throwing things out and going, no, let's try something, which became rather difficult to manage. So we sort of called a deadline at some point. It was difficult to do because we had way too much material, and once we sort of broke through the pain of realising that everybody had a different opinion about it, what was exciting was we realised that the only reason we had all this pain, because we didn't quite understand it yet. It's just a bunch of songs, no big deal. However, if you started to put them in a certain order, you did get quite a strong visual sense. Well, I did anyway. I mean, I get that anyway, but I was quite amazed how much the visual side of it had sort of got root in for me. I mean, I don't know about anybody else. For me, I was amazed about that, and how you fight so much with this sort of sense when you're working with a lack of self-confidence and you're trying things out but you don't know, and then when you put them together you finally see what it is you've been trying to do. You've never had a map, and then suddenly there's a map forming.
Often, yes, it's a third thing that what isn't planned,
and it's the most nerve-wracking, horrendous part of the whole process. It really is.
Well, I mean, but that's very interesting for you in a reverse way, Stanley, because you're hearing the music, of course, throughout the process of making the work. But as it moved towards a sequencing, towards a kind of assembly, in a film sense, a rough and a fine cut, shall we say? Did you find that change what you were doing visually? Did you could hear the images in a way?
It's a long time ago, and I find it hard to remember exactly. There's a sequence like that, but I think what seemed to happen was that the two worked pretty much in tandem. Mm-hmm. So the music would start to kind of emerge as a cohesive body of work around the same time. Mm-hmm. The same would happen to the visual stuff, because we've got 6 paintings downstairs, but really they were intended as raw material. Mm-hmm. So alongside that, we produced an immense amount of digital work, an immense number of drawings. Mm-hmm. Just, I don't know, that's what happens if you have a studio where you can all work together for as long as you like, with no one breathing down your neck particularly hard. So we've had, I don't know, over 1,000 pieces of work.
Sometimes it could be a sound, not necessarily a complete piece of music that would kick you off, and that you'd sort of feel like, something's opening up here. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in terms of obviously riffing off each other and the wider landscape and culture and history of the times, were you bringing in particular texts or films or artwork by other makers to kind of nudge things forward? Were you looking at any particular people to inform this, or had you created this kind of shared space that was enough to get you going in a way?
There was a lot of newspapers, and the nascent internet, stuff. There was countercultural stuff emerging online that hadn't been easily accessible before. Yeah. The sort of thing that you used to have to find like research books about in the past was now you could just find it online that. So there was lots of information that we were, almost daily clipping articles and pictures and phrases from the daily newspaper. Yeah. And that became, that was almost, there was lines that you kind of use, and mad cut-ups from the newspaper.
The whole point of like having a communal place to work that was ours, that people would bring in different stuff every day anyway, and that could be, we had a central area where we'd listen to records. The idea was trying to create that habit of sharing ideas, and they're not just necessarily about this specific thing at this moment,
Exactly. Well, thank you for mentioning the idea of cut-ups, because in my introduction I name-checked William Burroughs, of course, and just down the road in the 70s in his bunker here for many years. There's a sense of a kind of parallel journey there, trying to channel the kind of messages of the moment into something larger and enduring. But when you were in the space and you were thinking through, the kind of the ideas in both art forms that would realise themselves together, give us a flavour of how you were thinking about the internet in this, because Thom, obviously it's on the record, you and the band were very early adopters, really understood the potential of the internet there. Stanley, likewise, you had your own parallel journey through the net and kind of, again, very involved in the early days of it creatively. What was your sense of it then as a tool of possibility for this work, but also where do you think we are now with it?
Yes. Well, at the time, the internet was still a young and innocent creature, capable of possibly anything.
Possibilities.
Yeah. I mean, it was really good, because at that time, you could write your own HTML code really easily. I'm not a coder by any means, but I was able to write about the first 4 or 5 iterations of Radiohead.com, and all the funny things you could do with it. You could put pictures in that moved, and you could do all the things that we're now finding not quite so funny. So you could announce things that weren't true and have people believing them.
We were really, really super conscious. There was this moment where someone said to us, "You've got 500,000 people running through your site every month," and that just completely blew our minds.
Because we were using the internet exactly as we use the sketchbook. We were putting everything on it, and we weren't editing it particularly. We would just put stuff on
Clearly not. If
and
you
then
look back.
and they just put something else on top of it, almost in the same way we were painting and the band were making music. It was a kind of an accretion, rather than nothing. It's not like planning. You know, like you said earlier, you weren't. When you were making music, you weren't planning, this is going to sound like this, I'm going to make a song about that, and it's going to do this.
So the key to your question really, like now, is the obvious difference was, so we had this situation when all these people are running through the site, just picking up our, this sort of random stuff that we, as an extension of our sketchbooks. We weren't self-censoring in any way. We weren't scared of anything we said. We weren't, you know, it was like, whatever, doesn't matter.
Ed
because
put his diary on.
Ed put, yeah, it was sometimes very personal, sometimes angry, sometimes abusive, you know, sometimes just totally out there. It's a lot of half-formed ideas for songs in terms of lyrics and so on, whatever, you know, because, and there was no, that idea of like, oh no, I better not say that because, oh, I better not write that because, oh, wasn't there. It wasn't there at all.
Too early for that.
So I think that personally, ever since, I think that's been my problem with where we are right now. It's like I don't understand. I think it's good that it's a community, the internet's a community, that people communicate, but at the same time, I don't. There's an air of oppression about it, the way it physically functions in terms of being an artist, which I do not like.
It used to be a niche thing, you know. The number of people when we started, you could talk, you could have a group of people, and that was all. There weren't any more.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when Facebook didn't come into being till 2005 or something.
We weren't really worried about being liked.
No, there was no liking. Yeah, so it was the internet has become something very, very different in 20 years, which is, you know, it's a long time, but
also not perhaps, but
it's not a long time as well.
Exactly, and it's interesting that, you know, you mentioned earlier, Stanley, the idea of the layers, you know, of a painting, the layers, of course, of music, the audio tracks, and then, you know, the iterations of the net, and all of them give us traces of a, you know, particular moment in time and place, but also an accumulation over that time. So in that sense, we think of the internet now very much as a labyrinth. We're kind of lost down the rabbit hole, etc. And one of the most distinctive characters in the KID A world is the Minotaur. I wonder if you could just tell us, both of you, from your own perspectives, about the Minotaur.
Well, you know, the Minotaur is an enduring kind of trope of the monster. The monster in the dark, the monster underground. And it's there. It's kind of something that means something to almost any human being recognises that sort of very primal fear. And the idea for the Minotaur and the tearful Minotaur, there was a little cute character, because we'd been to Tokyo, first time for me, and it was mental. They have all these incredible toy shops. So I was going to these toy shops and getting all these little kind of toys, because my kids were quite small at the time. And they have all these little characters, like, you know, Hello Kitty, that kind of thing. Yeah. And so I had this sort of idea of that the Minotaur as actually, the monster is, of course, us. The prison is the thing that we've built around ourselves. And you know, this crying Minotaur is a kind of tragic, a kind of little cartoon tragic us.
Mm-hmm. That chimes with you, Thom, that kind of way of thinking?
Yeah, there was... when he first started doing it, I was a bit like, what the hell's going on here? Why is he still bringing this all the time? And then...
Yeah, keep drawing the little pointy ears.
Go back to the paintings.
Yeah.
And then... then I realised that the whole idea of sort of using characters like that within the artwork was a really nice sort of offset to the landscape thing, because the characters weren't us. It was none of the band. It wasn't anything. But it was something else. It was like a way to think of a song like "You and Whose Army." There's a kind of there is a character there. There is someone there going, "Come on," but someone who it's like an archetype, or like, well, it's on the edge of being a cliche. Everything's on the edge of being a cliche. Like, I'm almost taking a piss out
Yeah.
here, but I'm not quite. There was all that kind of thing, so it really chimed with me that way. And obviously the idea of the minotaurs and being stuck in one's own thoughts was exactly where I was at anyway.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's an enduring motif, but also one that really helps us, I think, think through this period of your shared creativity. The idea of process and end result, shall we say, is pretty terminal in the Minotaur story. But what's the balance between, the challenges and the satisfactions for each of you, between process and, shall we say, product, but let's say finish, perhaps, whenever you decide that moment has come? Do you enjoy one more? Are you satisfied with the result? Would you like to keep going indefinitely, Thom?
I hate the beginning of the process because it's truly terrifying.
Me too. Yeah.
In every sense, that's musical, artistic, everything about it. I absolutely enjoy and get super excited when the music has like some. It's hard for me because as the songwriter, the words are such a massive thing, a structural thing, and I've never ever found them easy to do. I've never found that process easy to do. So I use everything around it to try and help me with that, So once the words form, then everything tends to come to it, gravitate towards that. Yeah. But that finding that thing is like,
That's
wandering
the hard
around
bit.
in a dark maze.
Yeah.
Until you hear that sound, till you hear that the little voice goes, it's this, and then when that happens, the light pours in, and you have this amazing moment, and then it's like now I've got to finish it, and then when it's finally finished, it absolutely doesn't feel like yours anymore, and that works on every level, and then it becomes transparent. You can't see it, you can't hear it, it doesn't exist. You can listen to it, but it doesn't exist. It doesn't speak to you anymore. You can't hear anything. It becomes blank. And then, if you're me, you're on a tour bus somewhere, and you get off the tour bus, and some kid standing there with the record cover, and he's sort of talking about what it means to him, and then you relive it. Then someone gives it back to you that way, or on stage, or you do a mad thing for 2 years where you go through 20 years worth of work and drive yourself insane, going through sketchbooks and looking at the paintings, and it's speaking to you that way. But there's this negative space that happens when you've finished, where you're like, there's just total silence and nothing means anything.
How's that balance with you, Stanley?
It's kind of what he said, basically.
That's good, isn't it?
Saves me a bit of talking.
Right, next.
But no, a blank canvas is a horrible thing, and a half-finished painting is worse. And a three-quarters finished painting is like just, that's when they come the closest to getting a boot through them or a knife through them.
Yep.
And then something happens, and it's not big, it's not a massive thing, but suddenly it's completely different, and you're like, and then you have like a really good time for a really short time, and then you've fucking finished it, and you've got to start again. It's horrible.
With another one, right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But you're working, of course, across media. But if I, reduce it in a very crude, blunt way to a triangulation between sound, which includes music, of course, the lyrics, as you described the words, Thom, just now, and then the visual. Within that space, are they all constantly informing? I'm really glad you mentioned the lyrics and how the words come together. When they click, then maybe everything kicks off again, musically and perhaps visually as well.
There's lots of lyrics in the paintings. There's, it's well, kind of, this is the thing. We've always worked very, very closely with the idea of text and image being
we both studied fine art and English.
Yeah. Right.
And Dan is a great writer as well, so we have always shared text either way. So that's it. It is like a hidden framework sometimes.
Exactly.
But I was really interested in we both were with Jenny Holzer and Barbara Kruger and Victor Bergin or Bergin, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he did photographs with text. And you get this third thing that
I was
doesn't
obsessed
exist.
about that. Actually, we both were.
And the idea that then, Thom could say, here's the lyrics, and I'd be like, right, and just literally cut them up and then reorder them and then scratch them with a knife into the acrylic.
I've always been fascinated with lyrics. Lyrics are sort of like slogans anyway.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, when the text becomes graphic, of course, it's a great tradition. You've just described some of the key exponents, but then to think about that, alongside the music in this case is really, I think, productive and rewarding. So thank you both for that. Now, we were talking just now about the internet and, how pioneering you were there in terms of understanding its, positive potential early on. Similarly, we face an ecological collapse now, which we're much more aware of. You were very aware of it early on, and we can see that now in some of these canvases downstairs, in the larger body of work, in the lyrics, that anxiety, that sense of mounting panic about what's going on around us. Question for both of you, I guess, how conscious were you of that side of the story in the late 90s? And then how, if you were conscious or perhaps picking it up after the event, how did that inform the colour palette, Stanley? The white, the red, the blue. We're very aware of these very strong, charged colours in the canvases.
Fire and ice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find the whole business massively depressing. One of the books that we've done with Canongate that's coming out is a collection of a lot of scribbles and notes and bits of writing that we did at the time. And one thing that's in there is something we found, and it was selected ice melt. And it details all of the melting glaciers around the world, how much ice has been lost. This was in 1991, It's kind of, we're using it as a historical document then. And now, it's 20 years later than that. And
Telephone.
Is that the fax machine?
That is the fax machine.
Shall we pick it up?
I think Thom, why don't you answer it?
Hello? Oh, it's doing that thing.
Is it faxing into your ear?
Press start.
Ah.
This reminds me, Stanley, in the short film, do you remember in the...
Replace battery.
Yeah.
Replace battery.
Oh.
Just as well, in a belt and
eBay.
braces way, of course, dear viewers, we have a backup.
Yeah.
You might notice there's
we only
an
deal with professionals.
index card box behind me there. That was also found, of course, in the suspended office that I described earlier, discovered only this morning. So it's very fortunate that I have here a series of index cards, which I will now move to in a manual way, because technology, of course, can be relied on only so far. So we're back to the manual, which is perhaps a precursor of things to come as we move beyond technology into an older way. The rare manuscripts department here at Christie's will understand the potency of paper, and while these are not yet rare, they might well be in the future. So we're going to now move on to questions following the climate one, because that inspires, as you said, Stanley, a very great sense of despair. Creatively, for both of you, after finishing such a project as this, many, many years in the making, with a huge cost and a huge result, how do you galvanise in an ongoing way towards the possible future shape of a new work? Because you continue to work together and you continue to do so. So there's something in the band, in your relationship, that says now something is starting to stir again?
There's always something. There's always somewhere to go. I mean, to be honest, we've been frozen on the spot with this with KID A MNESIA, with a ray gun from space, and we'd really like it to move the fuck on now, please.
In the end. But it's been a sort of paralysis, because there's a lot of stuff that we had to go through to create the various strands of what we've made, and all of it. I've felt like a bank clerk just shuffling bits of paper around for a couple of years, and it's going to be a great relief to start something new.
I'm glad we did it, because I feel like we found something in it that we needed to find, but I'd really like it to go away now.
Yeah.
Well, all being well, of course, in November, it will come to us in many forms, of course, the music reissues, the major catalogue with Canongate of the artwork, with an extended interview with Thom and Stanley, of course, and also the book Fear Stalks a Lamb, which is the lyrics and text that Stanley's described were exchanged during this process, and a larger virtual, exploratory, immersive environment as the culmination of this. In this process which you described, which has been challenging and arduous in all sorts of ways, were you tempted at any point to kind of, you can't of course musically in the conventional sense, but to edit or tweak the story or the content in some way, to think about it updated? I don't mean creatively.
Actually, I'd say the opposite.
Very early thing.
What was interesting about it was when we first started thinking of the exhibition and so on, rather than sort of trying to rewrite it, as we dug through stuff, it was sort of telling us what to do.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting how, like, there was ideas and things that we could at the time never have seen through, which we've now seen through and seen to a logical conclusion with the virtual exhibition, which has been really, really fun. And sort of, it was almost like part of the process was that somehow it would get held in a time capsule and then be released 20 minutes later and 20 years later and do something weird again. Because as we were sort of improvising, seeing what where the virtual exhibition should go, we just looked through the work.
We didn't do anything new. That was, right at the beginning. It was no new work, and we're not going to adapt anything. We're not. And what was weird, it was like, as Thom says, a time capsule. We had all of this work, and what we'd done with it at the time, we didn't really know what it was. We just, I think you were contractually obliged to put out an LP, and that's what happened.
Or two,
yes, in the form of the most devoured musical media at the time was the compact disc, a format which I detest. A little kind of horrible, rattly plastic box with disc of plastic within it.
The funny thing was, we'd sort of like we'd absorbed this mentality that like the record company kind of taught us from doing OK Computer, where they were constantly coming to us saying we need material for this advert, or we need material for this shop window, or we need material for this or this or this or this. So we're like, okay, let's just generate loads of stuff. We didn't even look at it.
So each shop window was different, each advert was different. Oh my God.
So we were just, they were saying, we were just knocking stuff
like
out,
a machine.
not
but we
thinking
had
about it.
so much material. We could just let's use that for that cover, let's use that for that advert.
Let's use that extremely offensive cartoon and put it in NME. Let's do that,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the fecundity of production is, a real bonus given you're, working across the waterfront of media.
The weird thing now is, having done the digital exhibition, having hung the work downstairs, having made the books and repackaged the artwork, it's just like, oh, that's what it was for.
Right.
Yeah,
we didn't know.
If you keep it all, you'll never know quite what it can do later, right? I mean, that's the thing. Because you attempted, I think, earlier on, when this was all happening first time round, not to save a lot of the ephemera, And then, Thom, you realised there's...
No, I had this nagging feeling that we needed to go back to it, and then...
Yeah, I just wanted to delete it.
Yeah.
Good job I didn't.
I mean, let's just have as we move towards the close, let's just think a little bit about the spread across media, and there's a particular question about the KID A blips with Shinola, and without giving obviously anything away about the upcoming exhibition, is there something in the process of the making of those KID A blips that has informed how you think about what can happen digitally and visually in a moving image way with the exhibition?
With the exhibition, don't know. I mean, it was simply a response to a certain sort of situation. That we didn't think about it. Again, it was like it was almost like being commissioned in the sense that actually it was Chris Brown that we worked with a lot as well, not just Shinola, where we were being told we want to do TV adverts. I went, TV advert.
And videos, music videos.
Music
the whole
videos,
idea
blah, blah,
of
blah.
What
And
MTV wanted was a...
And the TV advert would be, here's the cover of this record by blah, 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 Oasis, Park Life, whatever, blah, blah, blah. 30 second, play the song, thanks very much. And so they showed, so we want to do that. And we're like, no fucking way. So
we'll take those 20 seconds of TV time.
If you want to pay for that, we'll give you what you're going to play.
Something.
You know, it was sort of a bit like that, really.
So again, a lot of that came from, a lot of the work that Chris and Shinola did was from, we just gave them everything and said, here you are, should we try and make some of this stuff move?
He slept on the couch with him and just like sipping beer going, yes, try this.
Put another one of those in. Yeah.
I mean,
art direction, I found out. That's what
it's
what
it is.
Yeah, I always thought it was a lot more cleverer.
Do that, do this. No, fantastic. Well, I mean, in terms, if this all goes belly up, of course, you have a whole new direction there, Stanley. But in terms of thinking about this idea of intervention, because you mentioned there, Thom, a kind of TV blip, and we can think about the newspaper with King of Limbs as being an intervention, a very different way, a much more kind of inky fingered way, and so on. Is there a part of what part of the process generates the kind of response that you are going to have? Have you noticed a pattern now over nearly 30 years of working when an idea takes a form or a direction? Is there a kind of a journey you can recognise now, or is each encounter with each project a whole kind of starting again?
I'd like it if it was a starting again.
Yeah, I think that it's you run out of tricks.
Yeah.
I mean, this whole like, hey, surprise, we dropped a record, or here's
exactly.
a teaser, or here's no. It's like, done that.
What strange thing are Radiohead going to do this time?
How about we don't do anything strange? Okay,
so
that's not strange enough.
We've not done anything strange.
No.
Like we put everything that we've ever done on the internet a couple of years ago as the Radiohead Public Library. So then hopefully we don't have to do anything anymore with the internet.
There's plenty there, right?
Will the internet go away? No.
Is that what it says?
No, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say we're moving very, very much now towards the end, and I just wanted to expand, out in a way to a kind of sort of human and sort of embodied response now to the whole body of work. It's a little bit like thinking in a sensorious way, shall we say. You mentioned a kind of synesthesia earlier, Thom, about sort of hearing the images or seeing the music. Do you think that's an active thing in how you collaborate together? I mean, are you both aware that you have a kind of synesthesic element in your approach?
I'm not so kind of. It doesn't feel that grand to me. It's more like a bit of a cheat, because if I can get the music to do the artwork, then I don't have to try so hard. I'm really lazy.
But they are supporting, but they're all freestanding, of course, aren't they? I mean, they're you were saying coming together downstairs, you hear and see, but obviously for a lot of us we'll encounter completely discreetly the images. Increasingly soon we can read the text and so on. So there's a whole body of work which includes, the internet projects, the whole band identity. And then there are these discrete artworks, Thom, within that. I mean, do you move between those two positions of totality and discretion, shall we say?
I don't know. I sometimes the like I say, it's always a struggle. It's always been a struggle. It will always be a struggle. If it's like just trying to find the one phrase missing in the song, or trying to find the right form or shape within a composition, or it's always the same and it's always difficult, and you wait for those moments when things fit together and you go, but they're few and far between.
It's a momentary relief.
Yeah, and so you have to kind of just enjoy the process of scratching away, finding what you find. If you can let yourself just to be absorbed by that, then things will happen. You just have to allow for that open sense, and when it comes together, yes, there'll be a form of synesthesia. There'll be a form of like, this speaks to this, which speaks to this, which speaks to this.
But this is rare. Most of the time, it's just a sort of blank, empty howling. You know, I'm sure it is for everybody. You're just
Yeah,
trying all the time to make something work, and you know, kind of luck is against you, really.
Yeah.
I think that is a point at which we will close. We are, of course, all of us out there, very, very grateful for those moments of the process when it does come together, when the howling resolves into music, right?
Oh yeah.
And when
Must
the
be.
image is brought out of the white noise of static. It's been an incredible journey over many, many years. It will continue, of course. Please do find yourself across all waterfront in median terms when it comes to November the 4th. Books from Canongate, the catalogue, and Fear Stalks the Land. The album reissues in all the various formats you know. Please find the Radiohead websites. The Christie's website, of course, follow that for the auction, which finishes on the 19th of October. And Stanley's own website as well. It's been a real pleasure talking to you both. Thank you to everyone at Christie's, our extensive and wonderful technical team, for delivering to you wherever you are. Thank you very much indeed for your questions. I'm really sorry if we couldn't get to all of them. There were many and they were really great, so much appreciated from me and from everyone here. But otherwise, wherever you are and whenever you are, please do have a safe and enjoyable onward journey through the day, the night, the evening, the morning or the afternoon, wherever you are now. But please do, wherever you are, put your hands together and raise a glass to Stanley Donwood and Thom Yorke. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
Indeed.